The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to Entrepreneurs Ascending. This isn't just a podcast. This is a call to action for all entrepreneurs who are tired of seeing their businesses and communities suffer while big business continues to grow by the billions. We challenge you to apply the content of our time together to create businesses that your clients can't resist, your employees love to work for, and your communities can depend on. Now is the time for Entrepreneurs Ascending. Welcome to Entrepreneurs Ascending, and welcome Amy to Entrepreneurs Ascending.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, this is the show for entrepreneurs, small business owners, and anybody who's really trying to kind of go from that solopreneur to that bigger entrepreneurial level, and but it's it got a little bit more heart than that too, because we understand that small business has really struggled over the past couple of years, and we're still seeing some struggles, and it's coming up in a lot of different ways, through just big business being allowed to thrive and doing a lot of lobbying on things that favor them, to just the Great Resignation and these big cultural changes that are really affecting folks these days. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have Dr. Narishkin here with us today. Amy, she's very relatable, Amy. And because she's going to help us as we kind of talk through a couple of big topics today. We've got two parts that really relate to what a lot of businesses are struggling today in terms of their people, right? And really even their customers and expanding their customer base or even serving their customers better. So part one, we're going to be talking about empathy and how empathy leads really to profits. Profits, of course, are critical for business success. We're not trying to manipulate with empathy. We are trying to understand how you can actually build a better quality business by using empathy, but building a thriving business, just to be clear. And then the second part is why cultural intelligence. We're going to talk a little bit about what it is, and then we're going to get into why it is so important during these times of the Great Resignation. And so Amy is a professional on that. She comes with a lot of experience. This is what Amy does. She is a pro on helping businesses break down those walls that are oftentimes put up between people, put up between different cultures and communities, and be able to extend that hand, reach across the aisle, and come together and thrive together. Is that fair to say, Amy?
The perfect example. and even cultural differences between departments, right? Within the organization, how to get, for example, production and engineering and marketing all on the same page. Exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny because marketing and sales oftentimes is so hand in hand, right? It should be, but then you have such big differences between those two departments, unfortunately. And in good, revenue strong companies, they understand the revenue operations and how it all ties together. Right. They bring it together, but oftentimes they kind of miss that.
There are different patterns of thinking, different values, systems, even in different departments. So often when we're talking about diversity, we think about particularly the binary concept here in St. Louis is around race, but diversity refers to differences in generation and gender and those who are able-bodied and those who are disabled.
Neurotypical.
Neurotypical and
neuroatypical, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you have different patterns of thinkings or different values, different behaviors, those are actually cultural differences. And getting on the same page, getting to shared understanding is what helps people connect more genuinely and creates that innovation and engagement and profit that you're referring to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I mean, this is going to be exciting. So make sure that you tune in for both parts. So jumping in, or maybe a brain dump about uh, empathy. When I start working with folks, oftentimes I encourage them to read John Maxwell's book, Everyone Communicates, Few Connect, because it's so critical that that aspect of connection for marketing, sales, customer development, leadership, developing that kind of business that your patrons love to do business with and your people love to work with and work for.
Right.
So, as you've worked with different marketing and sales departments and you've seen leadership in different organizations, where have you seen like the biggest challenges when it comes to empathy? Like what are some good examples?
I appreciate how you use the word connection in relationship to empathy.
Hmm.
And if I may, can I operationalize connection?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you feel connected with another, whether that's a colleague, a client, a family member,
Hmm.
both of you feel valued and heard and engaged.
Yeah.
And that's the goal. In order for there to be connection, for example, between Matt and Amy, Amy gets to see Matt and make sure or work toward ensuring that you feel valued, heard, and engaged. And I
Yeah.
already know that you're gifted. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing this podcast at ensuring that your guests feel valued, heard, and engaged. And this natural connection, it's not natural. It's very intentional what you work to create. What's
Mhm.
lovely about connection is it's Matt doesn't have all the answers, but he has some answers. Amy doesn't have all the answers, but has some answers. So
Mhm.
between the two of us, there's this new thing that's developing called shared understanding.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
it's in that third space that is this precious connection, not to be taken lightly. But if you're
Mhm.
both pouring into one another and seeing one another, something new can develop. And that's actually where innovation and collaboration and ultimately profit are going to come from is
Yeah.
when both parties feel valued and heard.
I love what you brought up there because 360-degree vision is what you can get if you start building people around you that can help you see around your
Mm,
blind spots. I mean, just like,
mm.
physically we can only see pretty much what's in front of us, a little bit of peripheral vision. Can't really even see over there very well, just maybe some movement, right?
Right.
But as you were saying, like, if you have that team around you of people that can see behind you, around you, to the side of you, and you can do that for each other, then it creates what I call 360-degree vision.
Right.
You operate with a lot more clarity of what's going on and where potentially you can go. You see opportunities, you see the risks. So I love that. I love that.
You're actually referring to bias. And
Hmm.
nowadays, bias, actually, I was working with a client yesterday and we were talking about unconscious bias and how there's this negative connotation around unconscious bias.
Hmm.
What I actually do a workshop on unconscious bias, and what we uncover in that workshop is kind of cool. That bias is something that we all have, and bias is it's assumptions that we have about ourselves and other people because we don't have all the information. And what I
Yeah.
love about what you're saying is that we need one another and we need to connect with one another as a compliment because there's no
Hmm.
way right now. I don't know what's going on in the better part of my brain. And a lot of people can't imagine that, right? You should, of course, we're aware of what's going on in our brain. But right now, I'm pretty sure my liver is working, but I can't tell you what it's doing. I'm unconscious of it, right? And so similarly, researchers, neurologists are not, can't even tell you how much is going on in your brain because we're not aware of all the capability. So we really do, to your point, Matt, need one another to overcome bias. We can never be healed of bias. We've all been enculturated with patterns of thought in a certain way. Not bad, not good. It just is. I have my preferences and I have my triggers, and you have your preferences and triggers. But together with this team, we can go, hey, wait, did you see that? Wait, did you notice she wasn't speaking? Or did you know that person's not in the room? Stuff that I wouldn't have seen, or they wouldn't have seen, or somebody else. Together, we're this really cool complement. The cool thing about bias is I have my strengths. And it's not to be downplayed, my awesomeness, and your awesomeness isn't to be downplayed just because I have gaps, right?
Right.
It points to that need for connection that we started with.
Absolutely. And when it comes down to like even strong marketing, like empathy-based marketing and empathy-based sales, a lot of times we kind of, I think we get into our heads and we think that we know best, and we kind of forget that we're not selling to ourselves, right? Like,
right.
I've literally talked to business owners and be like, yeah, I would be a terrible customer of my own if I. So sometimes, and especially as you grow your business, you're going to work with a lot of different folks who think a lot of different ways,
right,
have a lot of different motivations and needs, and use different words than you use. I mean, whatever's going on in their heads and their hearts might not be exactly what you as the business owner think might be going on. So having those people around you that can be like, well, I was actually talking to a customer and they worded it a little bit of a different way, and so maybe we should put that into our marketing. Maybe we should use that for a headline, right? So I mean, it's kind of like the difference between you put out marketing. Let's say you're selling cars, and it's like, oh yeah, this is the fastest, sexiest car. Where if you're trying to sell to, I mean, this is a maybe a little bit of an exaggerated difference, but if you're trying to sell to a family guy, or a family mom, she or he might be wanting, or they might be wanting a minivan, right? They just want something that's functional. You can fold the seats down, everything's vinyl in there, so you can just wipe things off. They're not necessarily looking for more horsepower, but that's kind of the difference.
What you're talking about, and I apologize, interrupted you.
No, go ahead. No.
What you're talking about is different perspectives, different needs, different perspectives, again, different values, different desires. And you're talking also, at least I'm hearing that, or you're pointing to the fact that so many of us go through life thinking that everyone's experience is the same as ours.
Yeah.
And actually, there's research that back that up. So when I move into an organization and, for example, the CEO wants to reach a broader market, right? And so that means they're going to have to diversify the people that are working in that business, because people buy from people they like or people that are familiar. And so they want to diversify. They don't know where to start. So I start with the IDI, which is an assessment tool, the Intercultural Development Inventory. And it assesses an organization, individual and organization's ability to connect, converse with people that are different. And we've, earlier in this conversation, we opened up that diversity can mean a lot of different differentiations in values and thinking patterns. So, and it's just one of 5 stages that people in the organization show up in. And do you mind if I name those 5 stages?
No, go ahead. And is this the graphic too?
No, I've
okay. All right.
Something else. I should have probably shared this graphic.
Sorry. I didn't mean to spoil the surprise. Well, go ahead. Name the 5 stages, please.
Going forward, when we talk, I'll bring that graphic. How about that?
All right. Well, it's a teaser for the audience. Like, hey, there's a graphic coming. Wait for it.
This graphic that I neglected to share with you has the 5 stages, and I think that you'll recognize them. The 5 stages are denial, polarization, minimization, acceptance, and adaptation. So you've got 5 stages. You probably know people who are sounding like they are in denial of differences or quite polarizing about differences. But what's interesting is that while we think we're in polarization in our society, and there are a lot of folks who are polarized, actually where most of us are is in minimization. In fact, 66.8%, that means almost 2/3 of the people who take the IDI worldwide are practicing minimization on one another,
Wow.
which means we're really focused on what we have in common, which is a beautiful thing to do, but it can also hinder us from really hearing what our customers and what our clients, what our colleagues need. And it blocks us from what the whole topic of this section is empathy.
So,
Because we can't empathize with someone or feel with someone if we can't imagine that their experience is a little different or quite different from ours.
So it's that minimization of the differences.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just kind of saying, well, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah.
Or I remember when the Me Too movement was igniting, I remember a guy said to me, I don't understand why she can't take a compliment. I'm just not going to say anything at all. And I said, that's actually going to make it worse, because women are still not in positions of leadership where equal to that of men. And so we need your mentoring. We need your support. We need you to speak into our lives and help us make connection. And so he said to me, well, okay. So I was challenging him to not minimize the differences between a man and a woman, but to recognize that there are just differences. And I said, so help me understand your desire to compliment. And he said, I just want to make a connection. And I asked him, can I just give you a little background information on perhaps a difference between men and women? And he said, sure. So I said, sexual violence is a global crisis. It's a global problem, but particularly for women, because 1 in 5 women at some point in their lives will be sexually assaulted versus 1 in 71 men. So there's a 20% chance that if you give a woman a compliment about her appearance, that it could be perceived as a threat. And he said, oh. And I said, that's what minimization does. We don't recognize that there's a difference here, and that, yeah, most of us really do appreciate compliments. But if you do give a compliment about someone's appearance, you want to watch their response, their reaction, and see if it landed well. And he said, well, what do I do to make sure it lands right? And I said, you can check. Wait, I just complimented you. How did that land on you? Or how did that impact you? And you don't want to say, did that come across wrong or bad or aggressive? Don't plant seeds for negativity. Just say, how did those words land on you? How did those words impact you? And when somebody is asked a legitimate question like that, open-ended, not did I offend you, which is a yes or no question, but how did those words land on you? People will step out of their own minimization and go, oh, that was okay. Or, yeah, that wasn't cool. He then said to me, he had a really good question. He said, well, what do I do if I don't compliment a woman on her appearance? And I said, that's such a sweet question. And I said, just imagine what else you could compliment. How about instead of complimenting her wardrobe, you compliment her work? Oh, okay. And he really appreciated having a starting point kind of out of minimization, meaning focusing on what we all have in common. We all love compliments, and accepting the differences, allowing for the differences to show up. That's my story. That's my story that kind of is an illustration of empathy.
Yeah. No, that's a great example, and I think it's a great example of awareness too. Of somebody like trying to be aware, but then it calling or falling a little bit flat. They're trying to be like, okay, I don't want to I don't want to necessarily offend any people. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want any, but they just didn't take the time to maybe think through it until they did ask. And then somebody was able to, Amy, you were able to provide that additional information that helped
Context.
him see into that, that context that helped him
Yeah.
see into his blind spot and helped him to be able to potentially make some better connections and be able to still have better empathy.
Exactly. And to your point, he wasn't wrong.
Yeah.
Part of what he was saying was absolutely spot on. So many of us need to be seen and recognized for what we're doing right and good.
Mhm.
And he needed more information. That was his blind spot. He didn't realize that there was a systemic minimization in play, right?
Yeah.
And not just in the United States. It's interesting. I've spoken with I have clients in the UK and India and China. The IDI is intriguing because it's been around for about 2 decades. And so it's got quite a data set, and it's been back translated into 18 languages. So
Really?
people
Okay.
around the world truly are showing up in minimization. And this is what we're doing to each other. And even if we don't intend to minimize, it's the cultural norm. It's the default. So we go there, and if you don't want to minimize, you actually have to be hyper intentional to check your impact, to wonder, wait, how did that land on that person? And most of I even do it. I even check my impact with my husband, right? I'm in this work, he's aware, and I'll say, all right, what was the impact of those words? Or how did you hear that? There's lots of different ways to say it. And he'll say to me, yeah, it was okay. Or not so good. And I'll, can I have a do-over? And he'll go, absolutely. I've never asked for a do-over and got no. People seem to be grateful that I'm recognizing that I screwed up and I can do it better.
Yeah, there's a big gap that I think that you're shedding some light on in the difference between intention and perception.
Yes.
And
You want to be less concerned about your intention and more concerned about your impact.
yeah. And there are some cultures that, historically speaking, it's more about like you're responsible for perceiving it correctly. But I think as we're broadening our understanding, and I think that we're trying to become a more understanding world, and there's more expectations of this. I think it's some of that I think is kind of going away, which I think is great, because if it's the responsibility of both parties to make sure that the message is sent and received in a way that fosters the most understanding, like, how can you go wrong?
Well, it can go wrong. It can go wrong.
Okay. All right.
If we don't recognize that the person with the cultural intelligence, the awareness that people have different triggers, different perspectives, doesn't realize that they're probably the ones that need to do the listening first. They need to set that pattern in place. We can't assume, because that would be minimization, that other people know to listen.
Yeah. That's good.
Something that's particularly important, because here you and I are identifying as two white people or two dominant culture people, right? And here we are talking about diversity. And I'll often get the question, I don't understand, Amy, how can you be in diversity? And I'll be challenged on a regular basis by a person of color. How can you be in diversity work? You don't know my experience. How can you know my experience? I remember one gentleman asking me at one time, and I said to him, Mr. Smith, there's no way that I can begin to imagine what it's like to live under an oppressive system every hour of every day. And he said, oh. And I said, what I am doing and what I can teach is the skills to be able to hear you out, to be able to feel and express compassion for the fact that your experience is so different, such that we can open up a space and opportunity for communication between us. And he said, oh, that's why a white lady can be in this work. And I'm like,
Yeah.
It was interesting because even his bias or his concept, his assumptions around what diversity work looks like was keeping him from really hearing me. And I had been doing a 45-minute workshop about connecting, but he couldn't really hear me until he could put down his bias. So it's really important that when you're talking with another person that you recognize that they don't have, right? We're not in minimization, so they don't have the skills that you have.
Yeah.
You can listen and hear them out, affirm their experience, whether or not it's the same as yours, and hopefully they'll be able to give you that gift back. If not, particularly if you're identified with the dominant culture or the white person, it may take 2, 3, or 4 conversations of you doing the listening and centering the conversation on them before they'll trust you enough to really open up. Just because historically they've been marginalized and silenced and sidelined for so long that when I approach, particularly looking quite so pasty white, that I'm not inherently trustworthy. I have to earn that trust by decentering the conversation, meaning focusing on them, maybe several times, maybe over months, and be patient with that process. I get to be patient with that process. It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard, but 100% worth it. And we're going to take a break here in a second, but in terms of these steps, to start asking more questions, start listening more, and realizing that there are dollars and cents to it. There was a Gallup study, and I think I've brought this up before, but there was a Gallup study a couple of years ago that actually looked at highly engaged companies versus low engagement companies, and there were a bunch of factors, but that showed why. Safety benefits, turnover benefits, just a ton of stuff. But to boil it down for the small business owner, a 20% profit improvement for the companies that had high engagement versus the companies that had low engagement. So if you really want a highly engaged team, you have to be able to empathize with them, understand where they're coming from, and build a kind of organization that they want to work for. And it does pay off. And empathy-based marketing, you understand where they're coming from, you understand what their needs are, and you can build the right kind of marketing that attracts them and converts them, so you have more clients. So, all right, well, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and then part 2, we're going to really get into cultural intelligence and why is it so important right now with the Great Resignation, everything going on. So we'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Have you been suffering from chronic pain, disease, or sleep disorders? Did you know that 75 to 90% of disease is caused by inflammation in the body? The sad truth is, most doctors just treat symptoms rather than finding and fixing root causes of inflammation. If you want to fix your health problems, then finding and fixing the cause of the inflammation is a must. It's time to demand this for your health care and start living life to its fullest again. Book a discovery appointment with the Functional Health Team founder, Dr. Flora, to get your answers ASAP at www.functionalhealthteam.com. Uh-oh. Oh, hey, she's back.
Sorry about that. Where'd she go?
quite the entrance.
Quite the entrance. That'll teach me to drop my pen during the break.
Oh, that wasn't intentional? I thought that was totally like... next time, maybe whenever you're on the show, you can drop from the ceiling.
I could drop from the ceiling or come in from the side.
Right. Or come in through the double doors behind you. Hello. That would be just really big on the entrance.
Mad show. Right.
All right. So now in part 2 here, we're wanting to really dig into culture intelligence and how does it really help a business thrive? And we kind of hit upon some of it when we were talking about empathy in the previous section. But how does, first of all, what is cultural intelligence, Amy?
What's really cool, Matt, is that you've already brought it up in this first subject about empathy, or I'm going to use the word compassion, because cultural intelligence is what enables you to engage with people who have a different perspective. It has a different background. A difference of opinion. It's as simple as that. And the elements are compassion, curiosity, contemplation, and context. And by that, I mean, if you want to reach that broader market, if you want to experience greater collaboration, you're probably going to have to diversify your organization. But if you diversify your organization and people don't know how to talk with one another, you've got greater stereotyping and stonewalling. You're going to actually, research shows, decrease productivity and create greater problems if you diversify without teaching these skills to appreciate and value and see differences as an asset, to move your organization and your people from minimization to acceptance and adaptation.
So if you just diversify just for the sake of diversifying,
Right.
it actually can have negative effects on your organization.
You might as well keep it a homogenous team, all white or all black or all women. There's little point in diversifying if people can't talk with one another.
Okay.
And I should say, talk with one another and value differences of perspective and background and opinion.
So it seems like cultural intelligence and understanding people who have different like values, beliefs, backgrounds, styles of communication is deeply rooted in emotional intelligence. Is that fair to say?
Oh, that's a beautiful, because so many of us know what emotional intelligence is, but cultural intelligence is a fairly new concept. Yes, emotional intelligence is awareness of your own feelings and being able to navigate and work with those and being aware of other people's feelings. The difference is cultural intelligence takes it to the next level because the compassion then you're feeling for yourself and others could be misinterpreted if you're not aware of their context. Which is why curiosity, compassion, and context all come into cultural intelligence. So what could be deemed as respect for you could be very off-putting for me, and I might not even know it unless I wonder what the impact of my words are, and ask, how did those words land on you? Was that helpful?
Absolutely. So how do you think that cultural intelligence is playing a role in the Great Resignation that's happening right now with everybody just leaving jobs or retiring early or just trying to figure out something to do rather than kind of the standard 9 to 5 or whatever they were doing before? I mean, we got people quitting in skilled trades and professional jobs and retail and restaurants. How do you think it does a Great Resignation? Does it play a role in the Great Resignation at all, you think?
Absolutely. If we're not understanding and appreciative of another's circumstances or context, they're eventually going to leave. There is a direct impact on attrition. If people don't feel, and we'll go back to kind of the foundation for my work, if people don't feel valued, heard, and engaged, why would they stick around? So let's just talk about the context of millennials, right? The generation below me. The 2 out of my 4 kids are millennials, Gen Y, and 2 of my kids are Gen Z, right? And one of the things that I do know about millennial generation, and observing it front line with my two older kids, is that they're really looking for transparency in an organization. They really like to see open books, and they want to make sure that organization is having a greater impact on society, on the climate, right? And making a difference. So if we take into consideration that context, it doesn't mean we have to change up our whole business and our whole mission and our whole purpose for being.
Yeah.
But if we're willing to move out of minimization and assume everybody's experience is the same as ours, and move toward acceptance and adaptation, which is cultural intelligence, we go, wow, all right, so if this is what millennials are looking for, I wonder what part of my business is already actually doing what they want. And maybe I could bring that up and out in our outreach for people, and also communicate that internally, do some PR internally to ensure that people feel engaged in the organization. Millennials don't want to work at a job. They want to work with people in an organization. It's a significant difference. And it can be really fun if you're willing to step out of minimization to explore with people what it is that they need to stick around.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the difference that you're kind of talking about is like a people being kind of just working in your mission, and it's like, they're just kind of fulfilling a role that you've kind of placed as opposed to being like on mission with you,
Yeah, that's perfect.
you
Beautiful
know.
words. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And part of that, if you want people to be on mission with you, I think they have to understand, or you have to understand as a leader, and help them to understand and connect their own personal mission and how it plays a role in the team's mission, or the company's mission. And then you're all, I think, in that alignment,
Yes.
on mission
Yeah.
together. Is that?
Yeah, it's intriguing. I'm working with a credit union right now, and the CEO is extraordinary. He makes sure that he meets with each one of his employees every year for
Wonderful.
an
Wonderful.
hour. And
Yeah.
even though he's not millennial, as the leader, he recognizes that he wants many of and many of his employees are women and money. So would while though not underrepresented in his organization, they are from historically underrepresented groups. And that deep listening and hearing allows him to what you pointed out earlier, this connect, empathize with their experience and get their context. And then share with them each how his credit union or their credit union, better words, right? How their credit union is reflecting their value system. And
Yeah.
I actually asked him when we started, is this a practice that you want to keep going with? And he said, undeniably, it's non-negotiable. And I'm like, wow, okay. But what was interesting was when he took the IDI, he showed up square in minimization. So as a CEO, he's beginning, he started wondering, gosh, how am I inadvertently, because there's nothing intentional about it. And he's got many people of color, many women, many millennials working for him. And he's like, how am I minimizing? And I said, that's the work. To move from one stage of development to the next takes 8 to 10 months, basically an academic year. Not hard work, just beginning to take notes on a spreadsheet or in a journal or on your phone and, date it and make note. Well, that didn't work. That worked, right? And getting to know some patterns. So he needed to develop some self-awareness about how he was coming across to other people and start checking his impact. How did those words land on you? And it's interesting in conversation after he's starting to pick up on patterns of what millennials need, what women need. It's really cool to step out of minimization. It's so fun. It's empowering.
Yeah.
I guess that's why I call my business Empowering Partners now that I think about it.
That makes sense. That really tracks well, actually. Well done. Now I could see somebody kind of on the cynical side of it. So I'm just going to kind of bring that up. It just kind of pops in my head. So we're told not to stereotype or put people in a box, right? And so they start taking notes of like, well, millennials think this, women think that. How far do you take that before it becomes, stereotyping or, potentially, putting too many people in a certain box? Like how far do you take that?
Okay. First of all, I love the cynicism. I love that you're playing devil's advocate, and that's awesome. Okay. Because that is a hugely important question. And stereotyping typically shows up from minimization down. Minimization, polarization, and denial. It's stereotyping. So often you're noticing differences, and you can understand why people need to practice political correctness, right? You don't want to talk about Jewish people or Catholic people or Muslim people or women in generalities if you're going to stick them in a box, and it's going to cut off communication. Because stereotyping is grounded in cutting off and hindering communication.
Okay.
And it can feel like violence. I mean, it can feel verbal violence. Maybe it can alienate people, and people will walk out the door. And if you're wondering why you've got attrition, it might be something that you want to look at. Are you practicing minimization? and
Yeah.
stereotyping people.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is what I'm talking about is not stereotypes, but cultural characteristics, which you might call stereotypes a ceiling for interactions, whereas cultural characteristics are a jumping off point for interactions. I actually take a look at cultural characteristics to understand someone's context. And
Okay.
if I'm using it as, well, I know everything, that's a stereotype. But if I'm using it as an opportunity to shift from knower to learner, and what more do I need to know about this individual and their unique expression of being millennial, then I'm in this place of listening and learning. And my intent is to open up communication and learn with that person. And like when we started our initial conversation was open up that space between you and me, where we're both learning and creating, birthing something new and precious. It's really sweet. Maybe this is a good time to show that graphic you alluded to.
Oh yeah, there's that graphic.
Oh, it's covering both of us up.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you can see here, cultural intelligence isn't going to happen on that left side. So we alluded to the fact before that all of us are walking around with our assumptions and our biases based on how we've been enculturated, how we've been trained up. And it's not good, bad, right, or wrong. It's just that we have those assumptions. It's what are we going to do with those assumptions? So if you've got people worried about, oh, I'm so judgmental, well, you should be. Your assumptions are what keep you safe if you're in a scary situation. It tells you to get the heck out. I want people to feel safe first. If they feel safe, but they go with that assumption as truth, that stereotype, and reinforce that story with their words and actions, close themselves off, and they act out in silence or violence, there's not going to be that connection. You're going to have misunderstanding. But if you are open and gathering more information and going up on this right side, creating a fuller story, learning more, you're open and curious, you get to that shared understanding. And then what you've already talked about, Matt. I mean, you've alluded to it a bunch of times: collaboration, innovation, and eventually profit. How does this land on you, this graphic?
How does this land on me? That's a great question, Amy. I think that this makes a lot of sense. And if we break this down to like, because, there's that whole, I think we can take the graphic down real quick. So,
Thank you.
But yeah, there's that example that people often use in terms of like biases or whatever. Like you're walking down the street and, as a white person, you might see a black person or a Mexican or something like that. And you might like go to the other side of the street. Now, sometimes I think that's a safety thing, right? So you're walking down the street, you see somebody like, oh, I don't know if I'm safe. Now, if it's like a safety thing, then you kind of have to do that next check of, okay, is it, what's the look on their face? Are they looking at me like in an aggressive way? Are they not even paying attention to me? Are there plenty of other people around?
So looking at your context.
Looking at your context. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it the middle of the day? As opposed to, well, I'm just gonna, So I think that's kind of like one of those moments where I've seen people do similar things very automatically, just because that's the habit that they've always had. That's the program that they've always ran in their lives. It's
the system that's in play.
Yeah.
It's actually that bias. And this is one of the things that's really important that comes out in my workshop, is that your bias isn't your fault. It's not something that we feel guilty about or we need to fix. It's something to be aware of.
Yeah.
And we all have it. And if you're aware of it, you can go, wait, I'm not safe, I'm out. Or wait, I'm okay. I can engage with this person and maybe get some more information. Remember, stepping into that learning posture. And it's kind of cool. You might develop a relationship you've never had before. Even though they smell or look or feel really different, it can be extraordinary developing a relationship with somebody who comes from a very different perspective and context. And it's weird at first because they're not just kind of automatically affirming your beliefs, and the brain really likes to have what it knows affirmed. If we can just slow down and resist that temptation to be affirmed just for a moment, it's incredible what you can learn from other people and the sweetness that can develop between you.
Well, even in that moment, when I'm walking down the street and somebody makes eye contact or something like that, I mean, again, like that can be easily perceived as a threat. But I typically try to like just smile, say, hey, and you just try to, or hey, nice hoodie or something like that, just to be to kind of make that connection, and I mean, that's a good way of kind of testing where that person's head's at. Now, of course, as a male, I know that's a little bit safer than a female walking down the street saying
look
hi.
at you looking at your context,
right? Like I'm looking at my context, but I try to reach out, and just, or not. I mean, just even a simple smile, just to say, hi, and or even just a head nod, just to, just to
acknowledgement,
and trying to kind of, just bridge gaps between humanity and hopefully help somebody have a better day, just because smiles help. But yeah, there is that aspect of it though, that like, again, just kind of thinking about like what's going on in your life and that context. Yeah. Can
I spread out that context even larger?
Yes, please.
So the desire to smile or not acknowledge another person actually is cultural as well, right? America is considered, for dominant culture, people who identify as white, we're considered a peach culture. Do you know what that means? Have you ever heard that expression?
I think I know where you're going with this, because I think I've heard something similar, but I'm not sure about the peach culture. I don't think I've heard that one before. So please.
There's peach cultures and coconut cultures.
All right.
So peach cultures are really soft on the outside and friendly and outgoing. And but you get down to that pit and it can be hard. It's pretty hard to break in once you get past the kind of the superficial friendliness. Our intentions are really good. We mean to be friendly.
Yeah.
However, it can be really hard to get to what you're referring to, that more authentic or genuine conversation. Dominant culture people are protected kind of at that pit level, but we're really kind of fleshy and soft on the outside. Whereas, for example, my daughter's fiance is Dutch, right? And if you smile or acknowledge somebody you don't know, they might turn away. They just look at you like you're nuts, like what? Or just go, oh, American, right?
Right. Oh, those crazy Americans. I don't like a crazy person at everybody.
Right, exactly. The stereotype. So I just want to provide the context that if you, as a white person, for example, smile or nod to a person of color who's been historically marginalized and for 400 years have experienced aggression from people who identify like you and me, you might not get any response. And a lot of, I've had a number of people tell me as a white person, I don't understand why they won't even acknowledge me. And it's like, you got to take into consideration the context, the history of a Black man acknowledging a white woman. Lynchings happened over that. And if you don't get acknowledged, it's not necessarily something personal. Again, it's something probably systemic that's in play, that if you take into account, do a little reading of your own, of other people's contexts, as well as understanding dominant cultural characteristics, you can go, oh, that's the best part about learning about cultural characteristics in play in our behavior. We're able to separate out, if somebody in Spain is not answering an email, for example, you can go, oh my God, why aren't they answering an email? They should be answering within 24 hours, right? Because that's our system. That's our rule. But typically in Spain, in more of a relationship-based culture, not so task-oriented as we are in the United States, they'll respond to your email when they've got information to give you. So it could be 3 days or a week. Have they dropped the ball? Well, according to our timing, they have. But if you know that cultural characteristic, not stereotype, right? That cultural characteristic could be in play. It allows you to wonder, rather than hold people down and in judgment and pathetic.
I love that. I love that. Well, we're unfortunately out of time. I think that maybe another time that we could have you come on would be kind of going into like what to look for and how to be like maybe even specific cultures and maybe how to be more open and how to think more about like how do I open some of these doors in ways that like, if I smile at somebody, I don't want to be offensive, right?
Right.
But how, what are some good ways to approach those things for folks who are
Can
trying?
I offer 2 recommendations?
Well, I think we're out of time, unfortunately.
I just wanted people to
Right,
know that they could read my blog if they want more information like you're talking about. That's it.
No, that's beautiful, beautiful. So how do people get a hold of you? What's your website?
Empoweringpartners.com. That's where my blog is. And if you have one takeaway, check your impact when you
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much today. Appreciate you watching or listening. Thank you, Amy, for being with us. This is a topic that we'll have to get deeper on because I think there's no end in sight for how important this topic is. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for being with us today. But now is the time to put what we talked about into practice. Remember, your family, employees, and community are depending on you to rise up and win. The great news is you're not alone. You're part of a resurgence of entrepreneurs who are ready to take their business, life, and impact to the next level, and we're going to do it together. This show is powered by Time for Success, where we help business owners every day who want more freedom and wealth while building a legacy of positive impact. Please follow Time for Success on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube for more helpful strategies and tools for creating the business and life of your dreams.